The quiet morning at Murphy's Diner exploded into chaos when Donald the Ox Braxton slammed his boot into Larry Clune's chest, sending the reserve father backward against a red vinyl booth. The bully had no idea the man he'd just attacked was Ghost 6, a retired Navy SEAL commander with more confirmed kills than days most people work in a year. Even worse for Donald, he didn't notice that every civilian in the diner, the truck driver reading his newspaper, the businessman checking his phone, the elderly man doing crossword, were all former members of Larry's specialized unit, and they just watched their commander get assaulted in front of his 8-year-old daughter. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it proves that powerful stories resonate everywhere. Larry Clune sat in the corner booth of Murphy's Diner on a Saturday morning in April, cutting pancakes for his 8-year-old daughter Mia. The diner was busy with the usual weekend crowd: truckers, families, teenagers nursing hangovers. Larry had picked this booth because it gave him a view of both doors and the kitchen entrance. He'd been retired from the Navy for 3 years, but some habits never died. Mia was talking about dragons. She wanted Larry to tell her a story about a purple dragon that protected villages. Larry told her about a dragon that sat quietly on a mountain and watched over people while they slept. He made it sound boring on purpose, leaving out the parts about violence and death that had defined his real career. Mia didn't need to know her father had spent 23 years as a SEAL commander, running black operations in countries most Americans couldn't find on a map. The bell above the door rang. Donald Braxton walked in. He was 6'2", 240 pounds, wearing a leather jacket and motorcycle boots. Larry assessed him immediately. Steroid user, probably armed, definitely looking for trouble. Braxton scanned the diner like he was choosing a victim, and his eyes landed on Larry's booth. Larry told Mia to eat her bacon. He kept his voice calm and his body language relaxed. He'd learned a long time ago that projecting weakness could defuse situations before they escalated. Sometimes the best way to avoid a fight was to look like you weren't worth fighting. Braxton walked over to their booth. He stood too close, invading Larry's personal space deliberately. He asked Larry where Mia's mother was. Larry said she wasn't there, which was true. His wife had died 6 years ago from cancer while Larry was overseas. Braxton made a comment about Larry being a single dad and not looking very intimidating. Larry didn't respond. He just kept eating his pancakes. 23 years of training had taught him that silence was often more effective than threats. Mia asked why the man was being rude. Braxton laughed and said she had a mouth on her. Larry set down his fork carefully and told Braxton to walk away. His voice was quiet but carried absolute authority, the same tone he'd used to brief teams before they kicked down doors in Fallujah. Braxton leaned down and put his hands on the table. He asked what Larry was going to do about it. He called Larry an old man, which was funny because Larry was only 42 and could still run a 6-minute mile with full gear. Larry noticed several things at once. Braxton's pupils were dilated, suggesting he was on something chemical. His breathing was elevated. His right hand kept moving toward his belt. But Larry also noticed something else. The truck driver 2 booths away had folded his newspaper. The businessman across the diner had put down his phone. The elderly man doing a crossword puzzle had set down his pen. These weren't random civilians. Larry knew exactly who they were. Before Larry could say anything else, Braxton kicked him in the chest. It was a fast kick, well executed, the kind taught in martial arts schools. It hit Larry square in the sternum and knocked the air out his lungs. Mia screamed. Larry stood up. The change in Larry was immediate. 1 second, he was a mild-mannered father in a worn jacket. The next second, he moved like a completely different person, balanced, precise, dangerous. He positioned himself between Braxton and Mia without appearing to think about it. Larry told Mia to close her eyes and count to 10. His voice was completely calm, like he was asking her to pass the syrup. Mia started counting, her voice shaking. Braxton was grinning, apparently pleased that he'd gotten a reaction. He started to say something aggressive, but he didn't get to finish. 3 things happened simultaneously, and Larry wasn't involved in any of them. The truck driver stood up from his booth. He was 6'4", heavily muscled, with a Punisher skull tattoo on his forearm and a SEAL trident on his wrist. the same trident Larry had. The businessman rose smoothly to his feet, revealing the build of someone who stayed in combat shape despite wearing expensive suits. The elderly man with the crossword puzzle stood last. He wasn't elderly at all. Maybe 50, compact and efficient-looking, positioned perfectly to control the sightlines to every exit. All three men moved into formation around Braxton, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. Because they had. In training exercises. In live combat. In operations that were still classified. Mia counted to 3, then 4, her eyes squeezed shut. Braxton froze. Even someone as stupid as him could read the sudden shift in the room's temperature. He spun around, taking in the three men surrounding him. He asked who they were. The truck driver smiled and said they were nobody, just having breakfast. Braxton called bullshit. He said it was a setup. Mia counted to 5, then 6. Larry still hadn't moved. He was standing perfectly still, positioned to shield his daughter. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire diner. He told Braxton he had 3 seconds to apologize to Mia and leave. After that, Larry would stop being polite. Braxton's bravado was cracking. He looked around at the 3 men blocking his exits. He said Larry couldn't do this, couldn't just threaten people. Larry told him he had 2 seconds, then 1 second. Mia counted to 7, then 8. Braxton made his choice. He threw a wild punch at Larry's head, telegraphing it so obviously that a child could have seen it coming. Larry slipped inside the punch with minimal movement. His hand came up and struck Braxton in the solar plexus with surgical precision. Braxton's air went out in a rush. Larry's other hand hit him in the side of the neck, targeting the vagus nerve cluster. Braxton's legs collapsed. The whole thing took less than 2 seconds. Larry caught Braxton on the way down and lowered him to the floor carefully, making sure he didn't hit his head. No permanent damage. No broken bones. Just a bully who couldn't breathe right and couldn't stand up. Mia counted to 9, then 10. Larry turned back to the booth and told her she could open her eyes. Mia peeked through her fingers and asked if the mean man was gone. Larry said he was taking a nap on the floor. The diner had gone completely silent. Every customer was staring. The waitress stood frozen with a coffee pot in her hand. The truck driver looked down at Braxton and then at Larry. He called Larry Commander. Larry's jaw tightened. He told the truck driver, whose name was Jackson, not to call him that anymore. Jackson said old habits died hard, like sitting in corners and keeping your back to walls and having your whole team scattered around a civilian diner on a Saturday morning just in case someone tested the old man. Larry understood immediately. His former team hadn't coincidentally shown up at Murphy's. They'd been here deliberately, providing security for their retired commander even though he'd been out for 3 years. Jackson, Martinez the businessman, and Chin the fake elderly man had been watching his back. Larry should have been angry. Instead, he felt grateful. Mia asked if those men knew Larry from his old job. Larry confirmed they did. She asked if it was a job he didn't talk about. Larry told her to finish her pancakes. On the floor, Braxton groaned and tried to sit up. Jackson put his boot on Braxton's chest and told him to stay down. The waitress said she was calling the sheriff. Larry told her that was a good idea and that he wanted to file an assault report. Braxton had attacked him in front of his daughter. Several witnesses could confirm it. Braxton wheezed that Larry had put him down. Larry explained it was self-defense. Braxton had thrown the first punch. The whole diner had seen it. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My father said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to my channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. Sheriff Tom Hendricks arrived 12 minutes later. He was 60 years old, a former Vietnam vet who'd been running law enforcement in this small town for 30 years. He walked into the diner with his hand resting on his service weapon, taking in the scene, Braxton on the floor, Jackson standing over him, Larry sitting calmly with Mia. Hendricks greeted Larry by name. Larry greeted him back. The sheriff asked what happened. Braxton claimed Larry had attacked him. Hendricks said that wasn't what the waitress had reported. She'd told him Braxton had kicked Larry while he was sitting down eating breakfast with his daughter. Braxton tried to claim Larry had goons backing him up. Hendricks looked around and said he only saw people having breakfast. Something passed between the sheriff and Larry, some unspoken understanding. Hendricks asked if Larry wanted to press charges. Larry considered it. He could teach Mia that violence had consequences. Or he could teach her something else, mercy, restraint. Larry said no. He didn't want to press charges. As long as Braxton apologized to Mia and left town, they could call it even. Braxton stared at him in disbelief. Hendricks gave Braxton a choice: apologize and leave, or get arrested for assault, disturbing the peace, and anything else the sheriff could think of. Braxton chose to apologize. He looked at Mia and said he was sorry that he'd been out of line. Mia didn't respond, just stared at him until he looked away. Hendricks escorted Braxton out of the diner. Through the window, Larry watched them have a quiet conversation next to Braxton's motorcycle. Jackson slid into the booth across from Larry and Mia. He said Larry had gone soft, that 5 years ago Braxton would have left in an ambulance. Larry said 5 years ago he didn't have an 8-year-old watching him. Martinez, the businessman, joined them, standing at the end of the booth. Larry noticed the bulge of his shoulder holster under his jacket. Chin came over too, carrying his crossword puzzle and coffee. He introduced himself to Mia and asked if she knew what her father used to do for work. Mia said her daddy told her dragon stories about dragons who protected people. Chen's expression softened. He said yes, they were dragons once upon a time. Larry felt the walls closing in. These men represented his past, and he didn't want that past contaminating his present. He told them thank you for breakfast, but he and Mia needed to finish up and get to the park. Martinez said the park could wait. He pulled out a black business card, heavy, expensive looking, and set it on the table. He said they needed to talk. Larry said no, they didn't. Martinez insisted it was important. Larry said everything was always important with them. The most critical mission, the most vital operation, the thing only they could do. He said he was done with important. He was doing normal now. Jackson and Chin exchanged glances. Martinez sighed and said the whole thing with Braxton wasn't random. They'd needed to see if Ghost 6 was still in there, under the dad clothes and the quiet life. So they'd set up a test. Larry's hand shot out and gripped Martinez's wrist hard enough to hurt. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. He asked if they'd set him up, if they'd brought violence to his daughter's breakfast to test him. Chin explained that Braxton was one of theirs, a Tier 1 operator out of Fort Bragg who specialized in undercover work. The whole thing had been controlled and safe. Larry's grip tightened. He asked how they could call kicking him in the chest in front of his 8-year-old safe. Martinez said they'd had to make it real, had to see Larry's reaction time and threat assessment. Larry released Martinez's wrist. He stood up, pulled out his wallet, and dropped 2 20s on the table. Far more than breakfast cost. He told Mia they were leaving. Mia asked what was happening. Larry said it was time to go. But Mia wasn't moving. She was looking at the 3 men and processing what they'd said. She asked if they were lying about the mean man. Larry said no, they were telling the truth. Braxton had been pretending as part of their game. Mia said that was a dumb game. Larry agreed. Martinez held up his hands and asked Larry to hear them out for 5 minutes. Larry said no. Martinez said there was a situation, a bad one, and they needed Ghost 6. Larry said Ghost 6 was retired. Chin leaned forward and said it was about Project Lighthouse. Larry froze. His hand, which had been reaching for Mia, stopped in midair. Project Lighthouse. He hadn't heard that name in 7 years. It was buried, classified, locked away in archives that required multiple security clearances to access. It had been a trafficking operation in Belarus, hidden under the guise of a pharmaceutical company. Larry had shut it down personally, and what he'd found in the basement levels still gave him nightmares. Larry said Chin was lying. Chin said he wished he was. It was back. Different location, different players, same methodology. They'd lost 2 agents already trying to infiltrate. They needed someone the enemy wouldn't see coming, someone who could blend into civilian life so well that he was invisible. Jackson said they needed someone who'd been doing exactly that for 3 years. Someone who'd proved that morning he still had every bit of his edge, even while cutting pancakes for his daughter. Larry sat back down slowly. His mind was pulling up fragments of memory from Project Lighthouse, things he'd buried deep because they were too dark to live with on a daily basis. Mia asked if he was okay. Larry looked at his daughter, 8 years old, purple dragon shirt, sparkly pigtails. Everything good and innocent in the world. Then he looked at the three men, offering him a way back into the darkness. Then he looked at the black business card on the table. He made his choice. Larry picked up the black business card. It was heavy, expensive. There was no name on it, no logo, just a phone number in silver and one word, Lighthouse. Larry tore it in half. He said no. Martinez's face fell. He started to say Larry didn't understand. Larry cut him off. He said he understood perfectly. There was a threat. People were dying. They needed the best operator they could find, and they thought that was him. But here's what they didn't understand. Larry didn't care. The words hung in the air like a grenade. Chen's eyes narrowed. He said Larry didn't mean that. Larry said he absolutely meant it. He tore the card into quarters. For 23 years, he'd cared. He'd care about every mission, every operation, every threat to national security. He'd cared so much that he'd missed his wife's funeral because he was in Yemen hunting a bomb maker. He'd cared so much that he didn't meet his daughter until she was 3 years old because he'd been too busy being Ghost 6. He let the pieces of card fall onto the table. Larry said he was done caring about the world. Now he only cared about his world. And his world was sitting right there in a purple dragon shirt, eating pancakes. Mia had been listening to everything. She reached over and took her father's hand. Her small fingers squeezed his larger ones. Jackson leaned back. He said they couldn't force Larry. Larry agreed. Jackson said that without Ghost 6, the operations would cost lives. Good lives, people like them, dragons protecting villages. Larry told him to find another dragon. The world was full of them. Jackson said none were like Larry. Larry said that wasn't his problem anymore. Larry stood up again, still holding Mia's hand. He said Sheriff Hendricks was going to come back inside in 30 seconds. And when he did, Larry was going to ask him to make sure none of them ever contacted Larry again. The sheriff was a good man and owed Larry a favor from something in 2023 that they didn't talk about. He'd make it happen. Martinez started to protest. Chin put a hand on his shoulder and told him to let Larry go. Martinez argued. Chin repeated himself, let him go. He'd made his choice, and they had to honor that. Larry nodded once at Chun, a gesture carrying the weight of their shared history. Then he asked Mia if she was ready to go to the park. Mia said yes. The diner was boring now. They walked toward the door. As they passed the waitress, Larry apologized for the excitement. She said it was the most interesting thing to happen there in 10 years. She told him to take care of his beautiful girl. Larry said he intended to. Sheriff Hendricks was outside, leaning against his cruiser. Braxton and his motorcycle were gone. The sheriff asked if everything was okay. Larry said it would be. He asked Hendricks for a favor. Those three men inside were going to contact him, and Larry needed the sheriff to make sure they understood that wasn't going to happen. Hendricks asked if these were the kind of men who listened to small-town sheriffs. Larry said they were the kind who understood when a line had been drawn. Hendricks said the line was drawn. Larry and Mia walked to his truck, a 10-year-old Ford F-150. Larry helped Mia into the passenger seat and buckled her in before he got in himself. He glanced back at Murphy's. Through the window, he could see Jackson, Martinez, and Chin still at the booth, watching him. Not with anger or disappointment, but with understanding. Chin raised his coffee cup in a small salute. Larry returned the gesture. In the truck, Mia asked if those dragon men wanted Larry to go back to his old job. Larry said they did. She asked if he was going to. He said no. She asked if it was because of her. Larry said yes, because of her, because of this, the truck, the town, the normal Saturday morning. This was better than anything he'd done before. Mia was quiet, thinking. Then she said the dragons in his stories protected villages, and that was his job, wasn't it? Protecting people. Larry confirmed it was. Mia said now he protected her instead of villages. That was still a dragon job, just a smaller village. Larry's throat got tight. She was exactly right. He was still protecting, still standing guard, still watching for threats. He just narrowed his area of operations to one small person who meant more than all the villages combined. He told her she was pretty smart. She said she knew. She got it from her dad. They drove to Riverside Park, a few acres near the creek that ran through town. It was busy with families and kids. Larry parked under his usual oak tree. As they walked toward the swings, Mia skipping ahead, Larry's phone buzzed. He pulled it out and found a text from an unknown number. "We understand. Stay safe, Ghost 6. A second text followed. "For what it's worth, you made the right choice." Larry deleted both messages. He'd get a new number tomorrow. Change his email. Make sure there were no other ways for his old life to reach into his new one. Mia had claimed a swing and was looking at him expectantly. She reminded him he'd promised to push her good and high. Larry positioned himself behind the swing and told her to hold on tight. He started pushing, gentle at first, then stronger as her delighted squeals encouraged him. She soared higher, her pigtails streaming behind her, her laughter cutting through all the noise and complications of the morning. This was the mission now. This swing, this park, this one small person who needed him to be a father more than the world, needed him to be Ghost 6. Later, when Mia was tired of swings and wanted the monkey bars, Larry sat on a bench and watched her play. The bruise on his chest was starting to ache. He'd ice it later. In the old days, he would have pushed through pain 3 times as bad without thinking about it. But in the old days, he hadn't had Mia needing him to be healthy enough to lift her onto things. An elderly couple walked past. The woman said Larry had a beautiful daughter. Larry thanked her. She said children grow up so fast, to enjoy every moment. Larry said he would. Somewhere in the world, there was probably a situation developing, a threat that required specialized skills and a particular kind of operator. Somewhere, good people were probably going to die because Ghost 6 had retired, and no one else quite measured up. Larry felt a small twinge of guilt about that. Very small. Then Mia succeeded at crossing the monkey bars completely. Her face lit up with triumph. She turned to make sure her father had seen it, and Larry gave her a thumbs up. She ran back to do it again, persistent and determined. Larry leaned back on the bench and watched his daughter play. The morning had started with violence and ended with monkey bars. His old team wanted him back in the field, wanted Ghost 6 to save the world one more time. But Ghost 6 was gone. There was only Larry Clune now, single father, resident of a small town, expert pancake cutter. And that was exactly who he wanted to be. The sun was warm. The park was full of children's laughter. Mia was attempting the monkey bars again, her tongue sticking out in concentration. Larry's phone was silent in his pocket, the threatening messages deleted, the black business card torn into confetti and left behind at Murphy's Diner. This was his life now. Normal, quiet, safe, and for the first time in 23 years, Larry Clune was exactly where he wanted to be. Larry Clune's story teaches us that true strength isn't about proving yourself to the world. It's about knowing when to walk away. The most dangerous people are often the quietest ones, those who have nothing left to prove because they've already proven everything. Larry had spent 23 years as Ghost 6, one of the deadliest operators alive. But he understood that real power lies in choosing your battles wisely. When his former team tested him with violence and tried to pull him back into the darkness with Project Lighthouse, he made the hardest choice a warrior can make. He chose love over legacy, family over fame, and peace over glory. The lesson here is profound. You don't have to accept every fight offered to you. You don't have to prove your worth to people who already know it. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is protect the small, quiet moments that matter most. Larry's greatest mission wasn't taking down enemies in foreign lands. It was being present for his daughter's laughter at the park. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comment section if you want part 2 of Larry and Mia's story. What happens when Project Lighthouse operatives won't take no for an answer? Will Larry's peaceful life be shattered again? How far will Ghost 6 go to protect his daughter when the past refuses to stay buried? Let me know if you want to hear more.